What is up, folks? Casual Dad here. Late night, early morning. It's all good. You may hear my dog chewing behind me. Brace for that. So, we have our ninth and final faction review here for Warhammer Combat Cards, and that's going to be Chaos. I joked last night when my Votan guide about it being I saved the worst for last. Chaos is actually pretty up there on my list of favorite factions just because of how flavorful they are, how interesting they are, and while the Space Marines faction did a really good job tackling the different chapters, the different sort of individual chapters that people tend to know and love in their cards, Chaos really doubled down on the gods and the demons and the possessions and all that stuff, and they just ended up with some really interesting, unique warlords that I really enjoy. So I'm going to do this a little different. I'm going to go through each warlord individually, not talk much about the bodyguards, and then I'm going to play some games in the campaign right now, because we have a max level Chaos campaign up. Want to dive into that, and that's a great way to experience these. So, without further ado, first up we have the Masque of Slaanesh, one of the squishier warlord, and also has the lowest cost by a mile. So again, cheapest warlord always has an innate advantage in that you can pack them with the most competitive bodyguards if your bodyguards outlevel your warlords. Is epic, so has that inspiring presence for that buff to all attacks on the board, and then also fear, which is a really good one, even if it tops out at rank 2 because of being epic. But the trait here is pretty fantastic. When friendly Chaos cards are above 50% wounds, they attack first when defending. So really, really powerful with other cards with fear that also have a lot of attack types. The obvious choice being the Slaanesh Greater Demon, which we'll talk about later. Really fantastic ability. Makes this one really tricky to finish off. If you're playing against the Masque, you're going to find a lot of cases where it's like, alright, all I need to do is hit that thing for like 5 melee, but if you attack with melee, the bodyguard still on the table will attack first and take you out before you finish it off. So this is a really fun warlord and a really, really powerful ability that's easy to underestimate. So really enjoy playing with the Masque. Downsides, of course, is the Masque itself is squishy, doesn't hit very hard, and is easy to take down. So that's the weakness. If you're playing against it or playing with it, you take down the Masque. And of course that ability turns off if cards are below half health. So if you can set a spread out damage and weaken cards to half or below, then they won't be attacking first anymore and you negate that ability. But it's a good one. Point of interest on that, I tested this last night, and the Votan Warlord that turns off traits also will shut down the attack first ability on cards. I don't know if that's a mistake or if that's what's supposed to happen, but it does. So that's a thing to keep in mind. Next up, we have Gloweth the Foul, representative of Nurgle. Really fantastic model. I painted one of these guys not too long ago, and really, really like that Lord of Contagion model. Has stats, he's only 2 points more than the Masque, so the stats are about on par. Slightly higher melee, slightly higher hit points, gets max fear, but only that. And let me actually check that. Yeah, and they both have the same secondary where they activate to debuff melee, which is good because they both are melee, so they don't want to be duking it out with someone that hits harder than they do. Money on this guy is Nurgle's Rot. When a friendly Chaos card is destroyed, the card that destroyed it is infected by Nurgle's Rot, as all its attack values reduced by 20%. So if an opposing card kills 3 of your cards, its attacks are all negative 60%. It can be a pretty intense debuff. Stacks with Fear and Taunt, so your Taunt and Fear cards will last longer if you keep them on the board, or if you keep them back until some opposing cards have died. Can be tough to play against. A couple things here. That is turned on by Barrage. So if you have a Barrage card that kills 3 cards, instantly gets that 60% debuff for getting 3 stacks of Rot. Is not triggered by things like Poison, or anything that will cause a card to die without directly attacking it. So the Parasite, if you have adjacent kills, those will not trigger additional stacks of Rot, and again, Poison. So yeah, it's a really, really powerful ability, but I tend to struggle with it because it is a ability and a deck that relies on your cards dying to get the most out of it, which is always kind of a tough balance to strike for any warlord. This one is especially defensive, so regen, fear, taunt, endless. Of course, you want to load with cheap endless and taunt to kind of feed that ability. But timing can be critical and matchups can be tough. I mentioned that Barrage that gets 3 kills across the board. This is another place where Badruk is a decent matchup, but you want to remember that timing where Badruk will wipe your board before the stacks are applied. So you can load the board with endless stuff, and then the next stuff you play will be better off. but it really thins your deck really fast, so that's actually not a terrific matchup. But fun Warlord, good to play, very thematic with Nurgle, and he's one of the ones that benefits the most from being in theme. So if you just play this guy with all of your best Nurgle cards, you're going to do okay, not bad. He's also one of the Warlords that I see performing the best at the upper tiers of the ladder. So if you're looking top 10%, top 6% and above, you'll see some Nurgles at like the 3,500 mark, or some Glowethroxes at the 3,500 mark. So look around for deck builds. Is very potent, but I personally struggle to play with him. Next we have Ahriman. I've talked about him being one of the most improved with the secondary traits. He has Brotherhood of Psykers, or Psychic Link, so he becomes more powerful the more Psykers are on the board, and then also gained Warp Surge, so that he actually has impact when he's deployed. And with his attack stats, especially in combination with Psychic Link, that can be very devastating when he's played, especially if it's on your turn, where you Warp Surge and then base attack with your bonus. Then we're talking like 300-400 damage. Very impressive. Comes in at a higher price point with slightly higher hit points. He's still on the squishy side and relatively easy to kill, but has really, really powerful hits. His ability is very in theme with Tzeentch, whatever, however we say that. At the start of each player's turn, so kind of twice per round, a random card will be hit with either +1 or +20 hit points if it's yours, or -1 or -20 hit points if it's the opposing one. And you can see how that can really swing a game. So if you've got a card sitting on 5 health, say it's Ahriman or something, that -20 could kill it outright, which is awesome. But that's a 1 in 4 chance based on the number of cards on the board. So if there are 6 cards on the board, there's a 50, oh geez, I don't know the statistics, but anyway, it's very, very unreliable is the key thing there. Still got a big buff because he himself gained the secondary trait, and of course the Lord of Change, the big psychic chicken, is one of the also most improved cards with the secondary traits because it gained regeneration, which on top of his ability can top it off and keep it alive measurably longer than it used to be able to. So Ahriman still has a place. He's one that performs better, but he's pretty risky because he himself is pretty squishy. The decks he runs tend to be small, and they are really... Psychic cards just don't tend to have very many hit points in general. So the entire deck ends up a little bit more fragile than you really want it to be. So it's a high-risk, high-reward game, but he is fast. You will either win or lose quickly. So if you're trying to ladder quickly in early levels with Chaos, he's a good one to start with, and then you can see how far you can get him. But he's probably not going to be one of the top performing, although he can be. Just that randomness is a little bit hard to rely on. Next up, we have my personal favorite, Skulltaker, Disciple of Khorne, which is funny because Tzeentch is actually my favorite of the Chaos Gods outside of the game, but I really like Skulltaker's ability, and he's just a lot of fun. Very thematic. He's got the debuff Psychic, which is not very useful, but Khorne doesn't like Psychers, so it tracks. Decent hit points, still coming in just a hair above Ahriman, and just a few points more. Yeah, so 5 points more, and what do we got? We got 240 versus 275. Yeah, so not a ton more, but he hits harder without buffs and has Furious Charge, so he will do significant damage when he hits the table, but his ability is both consistent and very powerful. His Locus of Decapitation. Woo! Whenever you attack with melee, if you leave an opposing card with 25 or less hit points, it is killed outright. The interaction with Ahriman on that is if you do lethal damage, Ahriman's ability triggers to bring the card back with 5 health. Since that doesn't technically count as it dying, then Skulltaker's ability applies after. So this is a good counter to Ahriman because you can double kill on a single hit. Likewise, if you take a card to 25 or less health, if it doesn't do lethal damage, you will knock it down to that minimum 5. So it's still really, really good against Ahriman, removes those secondary lives, just gives you a little extra edge against him. Can be a little bit challenging though. Really, really, of course, leans on melee. You want Furious Charge, you want Taunt. I like having shields and poison to have a little bit of durability, and the poison will weaken cards to the point where they're more vulnerable to Skulltaker's attacks, and also help eat away through shields. And and if you do hit an Ahriman card where you only get it to the second life, poison is a really nice way to finish it off. And as kind of a note about the faction, Chaos has some of the best access in the game to poison, which is a really powerful trait. I like Skulltaker. I think he's kind of middle of the road in terms of competitiveness. You do see some in the upper tiers of play, but they're not some of the highest rated decks. I really like Skulltaker, but he is a little bit challenging to build around because he's all melee. He still isn't that durable, doesn't have fear, and relies on kind of smashing stuff when a lot of the meta right now is really, really powerful melee decks. So you end up sort of face smashing each other back and forth rather than having any particular edge either way. But still, that's very corny. Good times. Alright, last two. We've got Huron Blackheart. Now, right out of the gate, he is probably the most competitive of all of the Chaos Warlords because he has fear, of course. Good stats for a decent cost. Still does not trigger Big Game Hunter despite being right on the edge there. Good hit points relative to the other stuff we've seen. Where's Skulltaker? Yeah. So he's slightly weaker than Skulltaker, but he's got fear, which does add a lot of defensive ability. Also, he has an attack stat in all three categories. He's the first one to do that. He's the first of the Warlords, I think. No. So Ahriman is the first to have 2 attack stats. Huron is the first to have all 3, which is a pretty nice advantage to be able to hit in any kind of attack stat, especially because of his trait, but he himself is fine. Where he really shines, though, is with this trait. When a friendly Chaos card kills an enemy card, it gains 40% of that card's attack stats, even if the attacking card did not have those attacks previously. To translate, say you have a card that does only melee, it kills a really big range shooting card, it will then get almost half of that shooting card's ranged attack added to its stat bar. So you've got cards that, if you are getting kills, your cards become just ridiculously powerful, which is kind of great. Which makes him very hard to play against, because if you're strategically losing cards to him, you are giving the cards that you don't kill a lot more power. And since this guy usually is accompanied by the Keeper of Secrets and some other beefy fear cards, which Chaos also has really good access to fear, that can make him very difficult to deal with very quickly. Especially that Keeper of Secrets, that Slaanesh Greater Demon. That thing is so hard to bring down, does tons of damage, and if it starts racking up kills and getting more damage, it is very difficult to get past and beat that. So probably the most competitive, a very, very scary Warlord, and one I see quite frequently, sort of the upper tiers. He's still relatively new in the whole scope of Warlords, and not all that many people have invested heavily in Chaos, so you're not going to see him that much, but if you do, it's likely to be a tough matchup. Really good, and tends to, again, and it doesn't matter what attack type you're using. If the Huron deck is doing any kills, it will then be able to hit you back with that attack type, so it's also very adaptable. So, great one, love it. Comes in at he's fantastic. And just, it's a cool ability, I just like that, because it's a lot like what you see in some of the cooler campaign modifiers, which we're going to see in a minute, but just built into him. Last but not least, we have Abaddon the Despoiler himself. Probably the single most recognizable character of all of the Warlords. I'm going to go ahead and call that. Because he is the Herald of Chaos itself, the War Master. Little Horus. Anyway, we've done enough of that. He has whopping stats. Comes in at 43, which is really low compared to the other Absolute Bruiser Warlords. Most of them are higher than that. Comes in at decent hit points, but then is just pure offense. He's got Furious Charge, and then he also has Inspiring Presence, and being legendary, he can get both of those to rank 4. But his ability is a tricky one. Whenever he himself attacks, it automatically gives every card, including him, +7 to all their attack stats. That's when he does his Furious Charge, whenever he shoots, whenever he attacks, whether it's on defense or offense, all the time. So that adds up really, really quickly, but he has to be on the board. So building Abaddon decks is a little bit challenging because you want to build it around a durable deck that does damage, but you also want Abaddon on the table fairly early, but you also want Abaddon himself to not die, and to have bodyguards with him who can kind of finish out the game. So it's really benefits from a medium-sized deck that is a combination of taunt, really heavy hitters, and cards that trade well. So it can be extremely powerful, especially because Ahriman himself, I keep doing that, I'm sorry, especially because Abaddon himself has that Furious Charge. He can be very impactful on his landing, and if you play him on your turn, you can just do crazy amounts of damage to kind of turn the game in your favor when you play him. Super good. He's been my most successful Warlord for a while here in the latter seasons, and been a lot of fun to play with. A lot of the reason for that is he's my most leveled Chaos Warlord, so that makes a difference. Also one who can do well if you just play thematically, if you just play with cards that are his Black Legion. Those are actually some of the best cards to include with him. Big ones being the Hearken the World Claimer is a really good combo with him because that's his Herald. And has Fear, really good hit points, and does both melee and ranged. Great stuff. It is also a thing to note that his ability does apply to cards that aren't on the board yet. So it can be a good idea to play him a little bit early to beef up one or two remaining cards in your deck, and then have them come out swinging a little harder, especially if you've kept one back that has Furious Charge or Precision Shot. It will do that with the buffed attack stats from Abaddon's ability. So let's go ahead and jump into the campaign here. That's our quick Warlord review. Let's go ahead and do a fight. So this is my favorite modifier, where it's everything's max level. You get a really big deck, and it is the most powerful card on the board. If you kill it, will give all of your cards. We'll give all of your cards a attack boost based on the attack stats of that card. And I'm not clear on the math. Point is, you want to kill the big stuff and not lose your big stuff. And it rotates every round with a different Warlord, just like the Space Marine one did not too long ago, which I really love. I'm going to try to do these fairly quickly, so we'll throw some Nurgle cards in there. Nurgle. And fill it out with some really big stuff. Of course, I want that bonus, and we're pretty melee focused. Oh yeah, that's a good one. And then we want, probably that guy. I really love this card. Let's go ahead and throw it in there, just to have a little range. We do want some target acquired, so where are you, buddy? He does not do target acquired. Okay, tried using the filter. We're going to look for... Where are you, Seeker? Sorry about this, guys. I'm trying to get better about knowing what I'm looking for. And then we're going to go ahead and drop off this guy. And we're in 31. Yeah, alright, there we go. Perfect. Boop. Chaos is also one of the factions that has a pretty balanced target acquired selection. We've been seeing that for all factions. They recently got the cheaper 15.1, but they already had the 22.1. They're both melee target acquired, but it's a faction that really enjoys melee anyway, so that's fine. Pop him here. I appreciate the change to Medicae, so it's not immediate now. He's 31 points. I need to be conscious of cost. I'm assuming... Oh, that was dumb. Assuming that this middle card is going to be the one that is the highest cost, because these guys aren't very high. Ooh, and I did not call that 16 and 12. Okay, cool. So we're going to go ahead and ruin someone's day. Boop. His turn. I just also did a classic blunder that I talked about in my Space Marines review. Whenever you are starting to deploy, make sure the opposing card, or the Warlord, is not Artemis. Because one of the things a lot of Warlords want to do is deploy their most powerful cards fairly early. And if you do that with Artemis, he's going to have maximum benefit from his ability smacking your cards around. Because of his ability where it does the random 20% loss to starting wounds. And if you only have one card on the table, that is the card that's going to lose its wounds. So, oh, look at that. That is awesome. These are early rounds. This is only round 2, so I expect these to be relatively easy. But they're still max level cards, so I can't really count on that too much. But that worked out really well for me so far. Oh, bummer. That was less good. And I think this guy is my most expensive card. So we're going to go ahead and ready. Just to not take the hit and be able to shuffle a little bit, because I don't want this guy to get too weak in front of this thing, but I want to kill that. Let's do it. Target acquired is especially powerful in this modifier, both because it lets you get the attack buff, but also make sure you're not killing off cards. So if I were to kill one of these two guys on the left, there's always a chance that a more powerful card would deploy behind it. A card that's more expensive than this guy. This guy's so expensive, it's pretty rare, but if you're actively trying to bring down the biggest bad on the board, you want to make sure nothing bigger pops in to kind of undo your work. This should be an easy matchup. And as you can see here, Gloweth's ability is barely even applying. I didn't really build this deck to take max advantage of that on purpose, because I don't like to rely on it, because I don't like relying on losing cards to win a game. But also because the opposing deck isn't all that scary. So I didn't even really need to. What do we got? Oh yeah, a little poor schmuck. Splat, splat, splat. So there you go. Not the best demonstration of how the decks perform because the campaign is a little weird, but you can see some of those cards that I would kind of put in there. Just for fun. Let's see what Warlord we get next. The first round was Abaddon. Ooh, let's open some packs real quick. Yeah. Both because it's fun to open packs on video, but also because I have to get to the next round. Now I'm going to play 3 of these. We'll see what Warlords come up, and then I may do some closing notes on the faction. Just real quick. Ooh, Tyberos. Nice. I need some of those. Alright, next up, this is round 3, is Huron. Awesome. I'm going to play what is one of the more kind of standard builds for him. And let's go ahead and do the note. Chaos is very cool in that it has all 4 greater demons, 1 greater demon from each of the 4 chaos gods, which is just really just thematic and fun. I love it. Let's see. So we want to throw in a Medicae and a little taunt. Let's benefit a little bit from the trait. Also have really good Medicae, but I think that guy's too expensive. I may have to go back on that. Yeah, you're too expensive. We'll throw this guy in here, and then we'll put in the cheap taunts and see how many points we have left. And having a 3 and 4 point taunt, like that puts Chaos on par with Tau as having the best chaff throwaway taunt cards in the game. Even better than Votann. Has an 8.1 that's good, but that's not on par with a 3 and a 4. Like that is fantastic. And we're going to get weird. There we go, just in case of ranged. And remember, Huron's ability is as I get kills, my cards will gain in power based on the power of the card that they killed, in addition to the modifier for this campaign. So when you get to the tail end of this, in the final rounds when you want to beat the final bosses, Huron is a really good early pick. If you have them, of course. Oh, yikes. I gotta kick this cold. Any moment now. And while I do really enjoy the Greater Demons, it's very cool and thematic, and I do run them sometimes. The only really competitive one... Well, excuse me, I shouldn't say only. The 2 really competitive ones are the Keeper of Secrets, probably way up there, and then the Lord of Change, the Tzeentch one. They are just so good. And the other one's just kind of okay. Nice. And by kind of okay, I mean they are very good, but for the points that they cost, and for the decks that you build them into, there are better options. Nice. And he just split his fire because I have taunt, and he's got target acquired. And so here, I mean, I'm killing chaff cards, so that's not going to help my stats very much. And even the most expensive card on the board right now is not very impressive. So I'm actually kind of hoping that he kills both of these cards so that I can play cards that are more powerful to finish off those guys and get the attack bonuses. No such luck, that's right. And we can see here, if he starts playing some melee cards, there could be a nasty turn later on, because that is a really impressive ready from Yarick. Yarick isn't particularly good, but he can be surprising, especially if it's built where it's a mix of melee and ranged ready, which is kind of a bad way to build it, because it's diluting your ability, but it does give you options. So as you're using ranged attacks, you're building up more and more of a melee attack and making a pretty significant hit there. Oh yeah. And Keeper of Secrets is so good because it has just a really good balance of stats, has an attack value in every single stat, has similar hit points and damage to the others, but also has fear, which makes it go so much farther in terms of durability and just what an impact it makes on the game. So for anything like this, where it's gathering up attack stats, it's just an incredibly powerful card in Huron decks. Like, look at that. Look at this thing. Good God. No one's bringing this down. It's got rank 4 fear and over 120 damage in every single stat, still sitting on 400 hit points. There could be a surprise target acquired or something really bad happening, but it's not bringing that down. It's pretty unlikely. Even without the Inspiring Presence, that's its attack stats right now. Ooh, okay. Alright. Well, that does balance things out a little bit, but that is why we brought... Ooh, hang on. Also, a trick on timing. Right now, the flag is on this guy. That will move because this guy is more expensive. So you want to keep an eye on that. So I could put my target acquired here, but I want it here. That's really important to keep an eye on that stuff during these campaigns, is that timing really, really makes a difference. So see, right before my turn, it switched. So you want to pay attention to that. Let's see. Ooh. It's going to take a minute to kill that. But we'll go ahead and play conservative where he's not going to hit me back. I'm fairly certain the Dominator is at the moment the most expensive card in Guard, so it's not going to be changed anytime soon. Excuse me, I'm sorry, that was awful. Let's do another. Is that the smart play? It is not. As tempting as it is. If this were a slightly more powerful taunt card that had enough to deal that 49 damage and get the kill, I totally would have gone that route. This is a little bit riskier because I then have a flank open with the tank, but we're going to take out Yarick, no problem without that. Woo, look at that! And that's not even all that impressive, because I didn't get all that many scary cards killed. When you're doing Huron with this campaign modifier, you can just get ridiculous in terms of what firepower you have in these cards. And he's going to shoot me, and he's probably going to die. Yeah, good job. There we go. So that was Huron. We're going to do one more and see what we get. It will probably be, I'm going to guess, Masque or Ahriman. We're not going to see Abaddon, because I'm probably not going to play enough of this to make you guys see that. But yeah, Masque. There we go. Also note, it's come up in the Reddit. You are able, when you click start, just click deploy. Pause. Think about it. Don't do it, because your Warlord switches every time, so it will be a empty deck if you just go ahead and click on that. Alright, so we're looking for cards that have really good attack values in multiple types. Let's see. He's really good. He's got an attack value in every type. And then I will definitely throw in my target acquired. We'll go with the cheap one at 15. There you are. Still got 23. Let's throw in the Medicae. And 7. And I could split that 3 and 4 taunt. Yeah, let's do that. 3 and 4 taunt. Most Chaos decks do start with that 3 and 4 taunt, just because they're such a great value. And usually you're putting some points into your really beefy, punchy cards. It's nice to have those to fill it out. Quick aside just on deck building in general. And this again is, I talk a lot about how the cards that rely, the Warlords that rely on your cards dying have an innate disadvantage. Especially in that you never want to run a deck that's not full strength. So that is challenging to sort of balance that out. Because one of the key things to think about when you're building a deck is if you do a full-size deck, you have the most options for bodyguards, you get to kind of spread damage out the most, but you also have the least predictable deck because your draws are really going to impact how your game plays. So if there are key pieces you really, really want to make sure you have at all times and play them when you need them, you want to run a less than full deck just to make sure that that card is there where you need it, when you need it. So you want to run a smaller deck of 5 to 6 bodyguards instead of the full 8. And that's particularly true of Warlords like Huron that we just looked at, because you don't want to get all your cheap taunt and chaff cards out at once. That's why Gloweth rocks can be a problem, because you don't want to get all your cheap stuff really early, so you're debuffing opponents' attacks, but also losing all your good stuff early, or losing all your debuff cards early. It just can be tricky to balance. So Canoness, most of the Guard Warlords actually, are challenging to build around if you focus on their ability, because you do risk not having the cards you want at the right times. Oh, this is going to be great. And here it's, oh boy, Logan. It's just crazy looking at this, because like the amount of damage the Keeper of Secrets is taking is just so minimal compared to what I should be because of that max level fear. Yeah, here we go. Logan himself. And now I don't want to discount this though, because even though I've got a pretty good lead in all of these are max level Space Marine Warlords, and the Warlords themselves are no slouch. This should be relatively easy, but you can always be taken off guard by these guys. But again, relatively easy win. This was so quick, I'm probably going to play one more. And at some point I should also do some games where I play with Chaos, not in these campaigns, because as much fun as it is to see the max level ones, it may not be a great indication of how the faction plays Most of the time, because almost no one has max level cards at all, let alone an entire deck of them. Got more gold. Open the gold. And the rewards in this are fantastic. If you don't have a copy of Abaddon, definitely try to chainsaw through this to get at least that rank 1 of him, because he's a really fantastic warlord. Ahriman, so let's see the randomness himself. Alright. I actually have a decent Ahriman deck already dialed in. We got you. And this is with the cards that I am used to using. Where are you, buddy? Here you are. And this guy is really, really good when you get him at high level, which does make it a little bit more challenging to build this because he is expensive. I'll throw you in there, and you in there, and then taunt. Sweet. That works out perfectly. And this should be a great one to demonstrate Ahriman, because this is actually a pretty standard Ahriman deck. And most of the ones I've run are the sorts of things I would include in a deck anyway. It's kind of what I would build, just because since we're all max level, these are still competitive battles. I've been breezing through them through a combination of luck and just because I play a lot of Chaos, but I don't want to discount how challenging these matches can be. So if you're struggling in any of these, even the early levels, should not feel bad about it at all. A lot of Chaos Psychers have Brotherhood of Psychers, so you do want to lean on quite a few Psychic cards. Usually I would have a couple more beefy Psychers. I would take this guy out and instead have the Rubric Marine, who has a really wonderful combination of traits where he has regen, so he's very durable. He has buff Psychic for his ready, which is great, and he has the Psyker keyword even though he doesn't have a Psychic attack, which is fantastic. All of that so that he is a really, really good companion with your Psychers, even though he isn't himself a Psyker, which allows him to be a card that has a really good combination of hit points and cost. So he's exactly kind of the filler card you want, and I was really happy when they rolled him out. They did a terrific job balancing that guy for the faction. And so you're seeing Ahriman sort of bolts of change kind of throw out across the board. A lot of the time it's just one hit point for me or 1 hit point for against him. It's not terribly impactful, but it's there. And sometimes it can be impactful, but you never know when. So, and this is one of the cool things they've done in these campaigns, is they balance out the traits that are kind of opposite. So Ahriman's Bolt of Change and then also the Canoness's random melee attack are pretty similar in a lot of ways. Now I want to take that down. Boop, there's 1 hit point, look at that. Sorry, 1 sec. And this is going to be our last game, then I'll do some closing notes and we'll get out of here. Yeah, this is probably, I'm playing a couple games, so this is probably one of my longer faction reviews. I hope it's been useful. I hope it hasn't been too long. Man, that thing is still trucking. This is make a note of this. This card is pretty fantastic at max level, just for having those shields, that combination of shields and hit points. It's hard to deal with. But I am not concerned about finishing off this game. Check that. This guy's going to be the highest cost, I think. No, she's still there. Wow. Okay. But yeah, speaking of the campaign, I talked about how they like to balance the Warlords with equivalent abilities across each other. So as you're playing these, know that on some level, the Warlord you're playing against is exactly the one that you don't want to face with the Warlord you're playing as. That's a little different in the later rounds because you get to choose, and just because the later ones just are what they are, regardless of, regardless of what you would play. And it's going to be Rowboat Guilliman himself. And now here, it is totally possible I could be like, hey, it'd be great if that sister battle was taken out by a neg 20. Nope. There it is. She was hit by a neg 1, but still taken out by the area effect Psychic Blast. So it worked out, but never ever count on the Bolt of Change being what you need when you need it. But sometimes it will be. Because, as they say on the tabletop, chaos is fickle. And this is going to be just a crushing defeat here. And ouch. And ouch. And then even more ouch. So, yep, there we go. Splat. So there's Ahriman. And I really, really like Ahriman. I enjoy playing him, but I do expect when I play him to have kind of a 50-50 chance of losing. Just because. Bad matchup, bad luck. Even with my deck being fairly competitive with good leveled cards, you just never know. Yeah, and there we go. So that's our quick Chaos faction review. I hope you enjoyed it, and good luck playing with Chaos. And so you saw me play with a couple kind of cards you'll see a lot in there. Some other ones I want to shout out. This guy, probably the best Endless card in the game. Competes with Celestine, now that she got Endless, but for the combination of cost, stats, and having Furious Charge, this guy is really good. Especially if you drop him into a ranged deck. If you're playing against a melee deck, every time you shoot, he will apply a melee debuff that just is really obnoxious to deal with as a melee deck. And then also hit back whenever attacks are made against it. Some other ones, of course, the World Claimer. There's pretty much no deck that won't benefit from having World Claimer in it. The combination of stats and fear, super good. One of the most powerful cards in the faction. We talked about the Keeper of Secrets and the Lord of Change. The other two can slot into some decks, but they're almost always better options. The Chaos Knights are fun, but they end up being pretty low level because they're newer cards, so it takes a while to get them. Once they get up there, though, they can be particularly good. You can do a variant of some of these decks that's ranged heavy and uses a lot of barrage with this guy, and this guy kind of being your mainstays. They can be very powerful in Huron decks, and then this guy having insane high damage stat and fear. Pretty solid, but you don't see them in play very much. Like, they'll come up, they're not all that powerful. This card, if you get to high level, is an absolute monster. That is a really good one to include in pretty much any deck because of the combination of stats and abilities. And then just, play around. And one of my favorites is Fabulous himself, old Fabius Vile. Has a really, really good combination there with both Fear, Medicae, and then some pretty baller stats for a respectable cost. He's a good card to fit in if you have him, especially in your Nurgle decks or your Skulltaker decks. And then, of course, going through here, we've seen most of the others. One of the best budget cards in the faction, Gorban. Great combination of stats, cost, and fear. Really, really good piece to kind of hold down a flank and be hard to remove and also do some damage. And again, it's kind of a melee-focused faction, so he's going to be one that comes up a lot. Got your cheaper target acquired. I talked about this guy, Ka. Love it. I was really happy when this card rolled out. Just got under regen rank 3, which is exciting. Awesome companion to your psychic decks. And then you've got kind of your endless chaff cheap cards. Chaos, unsurprisingly, has some of the best cheap chaff cards in the entire game, so those are good to play with. But you want to be careful not using all of them because that takes a lot of the teeth out of your deck and will, again, mess with your deck variety so you don't have the cards you want when you need them. So there's your Chaos faction review. Hope it was useful. Until next time.